So we're going to look at that DBQ lesson first and talk about that and all the parts of that lesson. What you're responsible for is that worksheet, that chart front and back. You need to hold on to the actual DBQ, the French and Indian War. Carly was just letting me know how much she hated this. Hang on to the French and Indian War part because that's what we'll be working with, and eventually we will be writing that DBQ. That will be the first one that we write. The College Board has, when we look over time at topics that they really, really like, they really, really like anything leading up to the Revolution. Now, it will be really weird what they do this year because typically if they have had a topic, that topic gets shelved for about 15 years. Last year, we had so many topics, I don't know what they're going to do. I have no clue what they're going to do. For those of you that took the exam last year, I don't know if we've had a conversation about what that looked like, just so that you understand what happened last year with our AP exam. And those of you that took other AP exams, you know that we had a short exam. It was just for all AP exams. It was just the writing portion. So whatever you took, you just wrote. For our purposes, not only did they have different topics, but then within the different topics, you had different documents. And I don't know if everybody knew that. They didn't tell teachers that, which was kind of nice that we didn't know, so we couldn't prepare. But they did it for a security measure. I don't know about other AP exams. But for our AP exam, one of our topics was Manifest Destiny, which was the one I thought was going to be, if we had taken the real test, I was banking on Manifest Destiny because they hadn't done that in a long time. And they did. They chose Manifest Destiny. But within Manifest Destiny, there were 4, the prompt was all the same, but there were 4 different sets of documents. So the purpose of that was, if you got Manifest Destiny and you were texting your friend or whatever you were doing and you said, oh, I've got Manifest Destiny too, you still couldn't cheat because you didn't know what documents you had. And those of you that took that know that that 45 minutes either went really, really fast or it went really, really slow.
Like
if
you
you
didn't have time to cheat. Like,
right, that was the
time.
purpose. And again,
you didn't have time to figure out what you were saying.
Right. Again, I hope that the idea of making those cheat sheets helped for that. That's where I kind of came up with that idea, which now I'll obviously use in a different. So for the rest of you that don't know what we're talking about, the DBQ is the backbone of the AP exam. So the nice thing about this year, even though you've not had an AP history class before, everybody's in the same boat because all we did last year was write. So everybody has not taken a 3-hour exam yet. Even my kids that are AP Bio kids, no one in here has taken a real AP exam yet. So we are all in the same boat, even though some of us may have more experience with this DBQ. Because the whole idea that this test is so grueling is that it takes you 3.5 hours, right? We're going to sit down at 8 o'clock and we won't be finished until 12:15. Yes.
What are the odds that we just do another online?
It's not. It won't. The reason we did it like that was because we just got thrown into this. And let me just say that there were as many AP teachers that really seriously said, let's just not test anybody. And then the other parts of us are like, are you kidding me? Like, how could you not test these kids that have worked this hard? We have to do something. Most of us wanted the multiple choice.
That would have been a lot better.
Yeah. Most of us would have wanted the multiple choice.
You gotta be lying to your cheat at too, though. Multiple choice. You don't think so?
No. No. Yeah.
No, I'm so glad it wasn't multiple.
All right, so let's get into this and what this is. So, people, lesson 3, the DBQ, analyzing documents and pre-writing. So this is what we're going to do in this lesson. We're going to look at all of the 7 documents. We're going to summarize what they are. We're going to group them together. We're going to figure out what we're doing. And to begin with, we're going to talk about what is a DBQ. So what kinds of writings will you do for the AP? What's a DBQ? What are the characteristics of a good and bad DBQ? So that's what you're looking at. In an English class, emphasis is placed on language, and that should be For those of you that don't feel like you have a strong writing capability, this should make you feel a little more at ease because you're not graded on grammar, you're not graded on punctuation, you're not graded on vocabulary, you're not graded on sentence structure. You're graded on the content and the knowledge that you have about the topic. You're supposed to be descriptive, elaborative, and sometimes being redundant is okay. Being redundant for a DBQ is not okay. It just doesn't do anything for you except waste your time and waste your space. So reiterating and saying, like I said before, any of those catchphrases that you use in other classes because you think your teachers don't read and all they're looking at is, did you fill up space, does not work in this class. It doesn't fit into any place in the rubric. And again, I didn't want to give us too much to do, but I'm not giving you the rubric today. We'll talk about that when it gets time. But really what you're doing is just getting points on the rubric. So you must organize your argument in a concise and logically ordered way, and redundancy is discouraged. Writing is never, ever, ever personal. So one of my goals is to make you a good writer. If I was just going to have you write for the DBQ to pass the test, I would be failing as a teacher. So, because that would be easy. So when I make corrections on your DBQ, and most of the time I am doing that in the sense of trying to make you a better writer, bless you, there'll be certain things that I will say, don't do, like pronouns. Don't use pronouns. I am fairly certain if we could bring George Washington back, he would be very upset if you used the idea that we crossed the Potomac, because you were not there. Using the word we is not going to take away points or not going to distract points. But for me, as your teacher, getting you to be good writers, using we in a term which you were not a part of, don't use it. It's better just to not use pronouns at all. It's better not to refer to George Washington as he, because do you know him that well? You don't. He's a pretty important dude, and you should always write out Washington, not he. Same with all of these. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is not use pronouns. It also helps, I think, in clarifying what you're saying by not using pronouns. So as a reader, I'm not confused by who you're talking about. When you talk about founding fathers, that's a great term to use, but somewhere you need to let me know that you know who those people are, right? So that's the thing that we're working on. Preparing to write a DBQ, the most important step in writing a DBQ, and the DBQ stands for document-based question. There's a prompt you have to answer, documents you have to use to answer that. It is almost impossible to write a good, well-organized DBQ without some kind of pre-writing. Some students may have gotten used to being able to write decent essays, but you just can't. You have to prepare. You have to plan. You have to figure out what these documents want you to do. So we are going to start with my favorite thing, a chart. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to do this on exam day. You aren't going to be able to create a chart to do that. But what happens is you do this on the sides here of what and how you are going to use documents. So in this pre-planning, this person has up here at the top. Now this is back in the day when we had, how many documents do we have? I think we had 14. This is back in the day when we had 14, A through I, however much that is. She knew she needed to use 6. She has her time written when she starts, when she's supposed to finish. These will be things that you need to do. And this person did do incredibly well. She has dates underlined, circled who she's talking about, and then she goes through and she's got her groups that she's made up. And she puts this on all of her, there's her thesis statement. And she'll put this on all, I'm not using that one. There she's got communism. So this is what you'll do, that chart you'll actually do on this. This is another thing that none of you have done before. Even though you're in your second AP history class, you actually haven't physically held on to this thing and been able to work through the documents with that 15-minute reading part, because you didn't get that, right? You didn't get even the 15-minute reading, which aggravated us very much. So that's what you'll be doing. So the pre-write chart is asking you to do a couple of things. One, summarize the document, and then that on that next page where I'm at the pre-write chart, the CAP analysis, that's what we'll talk about, what that means. That's an acronym for words. And then what category you're going to use it in. So the first one is read the prompt. Always read the prompt. Read the prompt more than once. Circle words, underline words. One of my students, I won't even tell you how long ago it is because I have lost complete track of time about how long anything was ago, because I just ran into Carson Harris and said, so are you in your last year? No, I graduated 2 years ago. Are you kidding me? You're not that old, Carson. I'm thinking he's still in college. Like, are you starting your senior year? He's like, oh, I've been graduated for 2 years. Oh, okay. So passage of time. I don't know when the student graduated, but our prompt was about, her prompt that she read was about conservation. So we had just done at the end of the 70s this big, huge thing on conservation. Rachel Carson writes a Science Spring. I told these stories about riding behind mosquito sprayers and inhaling DDT. Like, that was the most fun activity in the summertime when I was a kid. It was kind of like the ice cream person. We were more excited. The mosquito sprayer's out. And we would all get in our bikes and ride behind this mosquito sprayer. Like, that was the most fun. Who could catch up with it? We did it for days. I have inhaled so much of that stuff. So she was jazzed. She's like, conservation. I know everything about conservation. And so she starts writing. And as she says, I get about halfway through, I start really looking at the documents. And I realize that word isn't it's not conservation. It's conservatism. So that's my story, and read the prompt for what it says and not for what you hope it says. Read it. Make sure that you know that's what it is. Read the prompt. Number 3 says, read the prompt again, carefully, one at a time. Write down all the tasks. And so our prompt, and I hope I've fixed it right, because I've changed this so many times and I don't know if this is the exact prompt. But what you're doing is analyze the causes and effects of the French and Indian War on the relations between the British and its American colonies. So that's what we're doing. We have to do 2 things. We have to analyze what caused it and what the effects were. Yes.
Mine only says analyze the effects.
Okay.
Add in
yes. That's so on that page, and I think if you look at the actual DBQ itself, it says that. Will somebody please look at the actual DBQ and make sure it says analyze the causes and effects? It's that separate one. It just says on the DBQ. Okay. So please make sure, note to everybody on that DBQ that you need to analyze the causes and the effects. So make that change on the actual DBQ with all the documents.
Okay, so are we...
Alyssa, it's the thing that I stapled together that has that thing right there.
So are we turning in a DBQ?
Not this time, but we will.
So the only thing we're turning in is the chart. So
We do what?
We're just turning in the chart.
Yes, for this one, we're just doing the chart. But eventually, this is the first DBQ that we write. All right. So here's what you have to write. I got to analyze the causes, and then I have to also talk about the effects, and I have to do it with the documents. Since the majority of your evidence in a DBQ comes from documents, and this is where most students have difficulty, because I can answer that prompt. I can write an awesome essay about analyzing the causes and effects, but I have to use the documents. I have to. I have to use all 7 of them in some way in my response. If you write an awesome response that does not include the documents, it doesn't count. You don't get points for those things. Now, you'll get points for outside information, but that's just 1 point, right? So what we have to make sure that we do is we have to use the documents. Most of the time, the documents are set up in a way that they are not documents you know. You're not supposed to know them. About half of them should be things that you don't know, but are easily referred back to the documents. The other half are from people you know and the way that they think, and that's almost sometimes more important than the document itself, and you can use that information. So, let's see. So when you read the documents, it's important to be able to read and understand them. Historical documents are somewhat overwhelming. They have different spelling, different punctuation. What's always nice is if we get DBQs in the 20th century. Excuse me, then we don't have to worry about such weird languages and a whole lot of extra stuff. So read them, and then we'll start with the strategy. Keep the prompt in mind while you read. You must consider how the documents reflect to the prompt. There may be other information, but our main goal is to use evidence to respond to the prompt. Read the source information first. I'm going to say that again. Read the source information first. If it's a person that you know, that is important in the idea of answering that DBQ. If it's someone you've never heard of before, because at least half of the time on these DBQs, most of us have never heard because that's not important. But if you read something about George Washington, you need to know, and George Washington is the source, you need to know that who that person is very important. Okay? So if you don't know who the person is, that's not important. But if you see George Washington, Ben Franklin, if you see Abe Lincoln, then you know what's really important is the writer of that document. So make sure you do that. Read one sentence at a time. I'm going to skip down to the part where it says, don't freak out if you don't understand every single word. You're not meant to understand every single word, especially if they're written in the before the 20th century. You probably won't understand every word. What you need to get is the main idea, okay? Visuals. And I'm down to about the middle of that page. For a visual document, figure out how the picture reflects in your prompt. These are most often the hardest ones. You've gone too far. I'm only on the third page. I'm right above sample document interpretations. So for a visual document, figure out how the picture reflects the prompt. These you would think are the easiest. They're often the hardest, especially if that visual document is a political cartoon. And we work on political cartoons and we work on them and still it doesn't work. Again, also last year for my APUSH people, they had imperialism, and the imperialism was Uncle Sam and Filipinos, and they wrote that was Davy Crockett. It was Uncle Sam being nice and giving Filipinos guns. We were in a war with them, so I'm not sure why we would have given them guns. Political cartoons are hard because often they're satirical. They're like Saturday Night Live, and if you don't get the irony or the satire, you miss the whole point and you interpret it literally, which is bad. So we'll work on those again. For my AP Euro people, we didn't do political cartoons because there's not a lot in AP Euro. There's a ton, a boatload in APUSH, and they start with Jefferson. So that's where we'll start. Write a brief summary of the document as a whole. And when I say brief, I would say now not for your assignment, but when you're doing this on exam day, 5 quick words. What is this about? So keeping the prompt in mind, we're going to look at document 2. So we're using document 2. Document 2, read the source information. It's the chief of the Anaconda Nation of the Iroquois Confederacy. He is an Indian chief. He is speaking to the representatives of Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. So we have an Indian chief representing a large group of Indians speaking to white people as a representative to some kind of government legislative body. That's fairly significant. 1, he's being recognized that he's allowed to speak in front of these people. 2, he's representing a great bunch of people, and it's 1742. Has a French and Indian War happened yet? No French and Indian War yet. So, again, I don't know who this guy is either. Never heard of him. What do we know about the Iroquois? Yep, Confederacy, part of a bigger group. They all banded together. What role do they play? What kind of source is this? A speech. So he's talking in front of people. Support a cause. What's my cause? And we're going to move on. What about that date? 1742. Okay. So some of our sentences, and we'll go, we know our lands are now becoming more valuable. White people think we don't know their value, but we're sensible that the land is everlasting and blah, 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 blah. So what we get down to, step number 5, summarize how the document as a whole reflects on the prompt of your pre-writing. Remember, you only have to write enough in your summary to remind you what the document is about. If you need detail, you can go back. So for our pre-write, which you may use on your chart, Indians are really getting mad at colonists for not abiding by rules, and the chief says, hey, colonial people, the British said this is ours, stay out. Okay? Now we come to the most important part, and that's the CAP analysis. And this is the part that gets most students. Everybody can summarize a document. You all are smart enough to do that. That's not what the purpose of a DBQ is. The purpose is to use it for something. And the things that you have to use it for is context, that's the C, audience, point of view, and purpose. The easiest one always is context. The hardest one always is audience. I would avoid the audience like it has COVID-19. That's going to be my new thing. You do not want to do audience because the audience is really tricky because you think the audience is the representatives sitting in Pennsylvania, but that's not the audience. The audience are the colonists who are moving out to the place where the Indians say, don't get my land. The representatives sitting there live in Philadelphia. They're not the ones that the Indian chiefs are concerned about. I would make a mental note to avoid audience like it has COVID-19. Point of view is also very easy. As an Indian, point of view, Chloe, do you need to contact solution or something? Okay. I always have it if you need it. Point of view for this Indian chief is fairly an easy one to use as well. He is the head of a big group of Indians who are getting their land taken away by white people. That's an easy one. What's his purpose? His purpose is to say, hey, you people, you're taking our lands, we're getting mad. We're all living in peace and harmony right now, but that might go away. So those are the ways, and again, making sure that everybody understands, for each document, you only have to do one of these. You don't have to do context, audience, point of view, purpose for every single document. You just need to do one. And here again is the other part. One is not better than the other. But it is why I say avoid audience. Because you think that's the easiest one, it is often the hardest, trickiest one. Because when you have a cause, not everybody in that representative body is who your audience is. Some of them agree with you. So it's a hard one to do. So context, audience, point of view. You have to make these attachments to all 7 of your documents. Okay, a CAP analysis requires you to make an inference. So, of course, Chief, I can't think of his name, Iroquois, head of Chief of the Iroquois Nations, point of view, and you can use that. You can use that word if you want to. It doesn't read well, but you can say his point of view should be obvious as an Indian whose lands are being encroached on by white people, that he has made a line in the sand, stop coming into our land. That's his point of view. What's his purpose? His purpose is to say, hey, you're not abiding by the rules, and here's what might happen. Context is white people are moving into the areas that the British said that belong to the Iroquois. So context is what refers to context refers to the circumstances that form the setting for the event, statement, or the idea. What is happening? What is happening at that time? So, little experiment. What does this word mean? Ubiquity. Yeah, some of you know, but probably most of you don't. If I use it in context, nearly every restaurant in town has a menu that featured some sort of fancy macaroni and cheese. So eventually, the ubiquity of this dish made it seem totally commonplace. Now you understand. Ubiquity means kind of unique, but when it's served everywhere, it's not. Oh, here's my Team Edward. Every summer I think I need to do another one of these because these are so old, but I do like Team Edward. I was never Team Edward. I was Team Jacob, but just saying. Now think of the oldest, least technologically savvy person you know, maybe your great-grandma, someone that might be me. I'm getting better. Imagine that he or she has just gotten a Twitter account. Here is, I just want to throw this out. Context. this morning, I saw on the news, and we're not going to say anything, I'm just going to throw you out why context is important. A toy store in Manhattan added to their playlist Cardi B's WAP. Context is necessary for that, correct? Context. Context. I don't want to talk about it. We're moving on. So, context. Rocco. Stop. So, you might need to explain that Edward is a vampire. We're back to Twilight, a safe context. So, audience. We're going to the audience. Intended audience of this document. So, this is where, again, you guys get in trouble. So you'll never use like high schoolers taking the AP test or people. Who's the audience? And again, more often than not, the audience is a small group of people. Again, this advertisement is geared toward parents, not babies, and actually is it geared toward all parents? That's where you make the mistake. If you say, yes, we're done. Someone in the room always shouts babies, and even parents. You cannot say that the audience is parents because I am a parent. Am I interested in baby food? Absolutely not, right? So that's the one that's hard. Point of view refers to the viewpoint of the author. So those of you that are taking this for the first time, this is not first person, second person, third person. This is not an English point of view. Point of view means the point of view of how I perceive this document. And the way that you perceive a document as an Indian is going to be very differently than the way that you would perceive it as someone sitting in that audience listening to that. Purpose refers to the intended purpose of the original document. This one gets a little tricky as well because sometimes that purpose is hidden a little deeper. The chief's purpose, I think, is to threaten the legislative branches in Pennsylvania. This is what we intend to do if you don't abide by the treaties. So make sure you do all of those things and don't make these mistakes. Using information from the source. That's already been given to you. So if you reuse that, that's not going to count. You have to use something that you have thought of in your brain. Using a summary of the document as its purpose. That is not the purpose. It has to have an inference. Using context or audience that would apply to any document. And that is the idea that is making audience so difficult to use. And secondary source. If you notice that the date on the document is way later than the time period, do not be confused. That means a secondary source. You've got a cap analysis freebie. Please put a box around this one because this is one that's really easy as a secondary source. So a secondary source would be someone who looks back at the French and Indian War and is writing about the French and Indian War in 1980. And every now and then they'll pop up. Like we're talking about 1776 and we get someone writing about the Revolutionary War in 1980. And so that's a freebie. And you start, as this is a secondary source, this author's access to numerous sources of information would affect his or her outlook on the topic, hopefully leading to a less subjective outlook than the contemporaries of that time period. That is awesome. Okay. Document 7 is a masthead from a newspaper. Thought process, again, for document 1, the source says it's a newspaper. We know that it is after the French and Indian War. So we know at this point, 1776 is after. You guys really need to pay attention to the dates because these dates, as we already saw, one of them is 1742 before the war, and this one is 1765 after the war. So make sure you pay attention to the span of your dates. And again, thought process for document 7, the feelings of the colonists have about new colonists have increased. The audience would be disgruntled colonists. And again, I would make sure that you think about what disgruntled colonists and where they are because not all colonists are disgruntled. The printers of this newspaper are against the new policies of the Crown and have no fear of publishing their views. That's important. And the purpose is to criticize the action of the Crown. Again, purpose is good. So, Activity 3A, read through the DBQ documents in the DBQ that you have and put those all together. The next part is grouping. Activity 3B, you're looking at putting these things in groups. That's the second part. You're going to think about when we start writing things like a thesis. You have 3 groups you've got to come up with. So I've got all types of things there to group in different ways. And then Act 5C is reference the French and Indian War and then group those together. If you look at the chart, I already have on that back page, I've done a grouping activity, camping, beach, skiing. You've got to come up with 2 more. And then the very back of that, I actually give you the groups. I don't ask you to come up with them. You've got 3 different, 2 sets of 3, political, social, and economic, which is the benchmark. And then we go into a little more detail, Indian tension causes, crown tensions and causes, colonial tensions and causes, okay? That is all that you have to do to turn in. Please don't turn in the DBQ with this worksheet because you will need it when you complete the second part, okay? All right. And